Welcome back to The Weekend. We are following the breaking news after Iran launched the first attack from its soil on Israel. Israel and allies, including the United States, were able to intercept the vast majority of Iran's more 300 projectiles. But now there are major concerns of an escalation in the region. Today, President Biden is expected to meet with fellow leaders of the G7 to discuss a diplomatic response. Joining us now is Democratic Senator Tim Kaine of Virginia. He's a member of the Foreign Affairs and Armed Services Committee. He's also the author of the new book, Walk, Ride, Paddle, A Life Outside.
We're very excited, Senator, to talk about the book. But first, to this breaking news, our colleague Andrea Mitchell just reporting in the last hour that President Biden spoke last night with Prime Minister Netanyahu, essentially saying, take the win. We stand with Israel, but if you retaliate, we won't have your back. What happens if Netanyahu does not heed that call?
Boy, Alicia, that would be very troubling. I mean, I think what really has to happen, is Congress has got to finally pass this supplemental bill that the Senate passed 2 months ago. If we can do that, we can provide aid for Israel to defend itself against Iran and for Ukraine to defend itself against Russia. But the key is defense. We don't need Israel going on more offense right now against Iran, because you know how tensions are already escalating with the Houthis in the Red Sea, with Hezbollah from Lebanon, with the Iranian-backed militias in Iraq and Syria, and then the tragedy in Israel, Gaza. The last thing we need is more escalation. So we stood with Israel to help them knock down these attacks from Iranian soil on Israel. But now is the time for de-escalation. And that means getting to this hostage deal ceasefire that will promote humanitarian aid and a de-escalation in the region.
Senator, you've got the question of de-escalation, but you also have the question of how the Congress and particularly the Senate will respond as well, in terms of what emphasis can be added to this idea of having Netanyahu bring the temperature down, as the president said, take the win. What do you anticipate over the next few days from the leadership of your committee, from efforts in the House to sort of tighten that messaging, if you will, that the president is clearly wanting to put a stake in terms of, okay, no more, because the U.S. is not prepared to go on the offensive on behalf of Israel?
Michael, good to see you again, and thanks for that question. I mean, the timing is sort of just, it's right there before us. This bill that the Senate passed in an overwhelming bipartisan way, I think it was 70 to 29 back in February. That bill is right on the floor, ready for the House to act. And I think it's very important. This bill has defense aid for Israel, defense aid for Ukraine, and humanitarian aid for Gaza in this bill. So it's sitting right there. But it's just taken way too long. We started talking about the need to aid Ukraine in September, before the attack of October 7th. So it's taken too long. My hope is the challenges of the weekend will promote action in the Article 1 branch. And, some early signs I see suggest that it will. Will it be the action that I want to see in the Senate? Who knows? But I think the events of the weekend make plain that Congress cannot just twiddle our thumbs. We got to get off the couch and take action.
Senator, we just had, I was going to call him Secretary Meeks, Congressman Meeks on in our last hour, and he noted that the only aid bill to take up is, in fact, the bill that the Senate passed, and that would be the only piece of legislation that he would support. I expect we will hear similar things from other House Democrats going forward. If House Republicans do not heed that promise, if you will, from Democrats such as Congressman Meeks, then what happens here? What happens if they do just put a bill on the floor that is Israel aid only? How long then could it take for this to work its way through the process?
Simone, the Senate's not going to accept an Israel-only bill. We both of these challenges involve the U.S. defending democracies against illegal attacks by authoritarian nations, Ukraine and Israel. We in the Senate, we have turned down an Israel-only bill in the past, not just Democrats, but Republicans as well, because we believe these two challenges are linked. We're either going to stand with our allies or we're not, and we're not going to pick between allies right now. The Ukraine situation is getting more dire by the day, and it needs emergency attention. And obviously, Israel needs to be able to defend itself from more attacks by Iran if they should come. So I can speak, I think, pretty safely for my Senate colleagues that an Israel-only bill will not pass. An Israel-Ukraine bill is what we need to do, and we can do it.
This is all, of course, happening during a presidential election year. You have former President Trump out on the stump, unsurprisingly making the argument that this would all be very different if he were president of the United States. In some ways, I think we agree on that. I think we disagree on what he means by it, calling the current president weak on Iran. How do you counter those incoming political attacks from Republicans?
Well, look, President Trump made the region dramatically less safe. I mean, you know, his decision to tear up a diplomatic deal with Iran next to the decision to invade Iraq, those were the two things that emboldened Iran in the region. President Trump made one of the most disastrous decisions in the history of U.S. foreign policy, and it's made the region dramatically less safe. And I've got friends all over the region, including in Israel, who point that out. So sure, he's going to go out and mouth off, just like he's mouthing off about being proud that he destroyed Roe versus Wade. Let him keep mouthing off. I think this is a time where Americans are glad that there's somebody in office who is careful and cautious, who has a great team around him, and isn't doing the tough work of diplomacy by whatever stray thought crosses his mind at any point in time.
But, Senator, I want to pick up on that point because I think it's an important one that Alicia raises with respect to the politics here and how that does play out in a very, very tightly contested presidential race. To that end, do you see some ground on which the Democrats could leverage the Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson, who is being battered and bruised by his caucus, specifically Marjorie Taylor Greene, and others who are really pressuring him to really break rank from the idea of not just helping Israel, but not helping Ukraine? How do you take advantage politically and leverage the Speaker against the House and President Trump, who clearly do not have the interests of global stability in mind?
Michael, you're asking me to do something I'm not so good at, which is predict House Republican behavior. I mean, I've never been an expert.
I thought I'd try.
You know, here's the way I look at this. The House embarrassed itself badly when they threw over a Speaker, Kevin McCarthy, without a replacement. And it took them a long time to find a replacement. I think that they probably deep down know they can't usher a Speaker out without a replacement. And their margin is so narrow, I don't see anybody in that House Republican caucus who could get the votes to be Speaker right now. So sure, Speaker Johnson doesn't want to have, you know, Marjorie Taylor Greene or other people mouthing off about replacing them. But I got to believe he's pretty confident internally they can't do that. And once you know they can't follow through on a noisy but empty threat, then do what's right. And you saw the Speaker did that with respect to the Pfizer reauthorization vote. He did that with respect to the two appropriations bills. He sort of has to sometime try it their way first. But once it's plain that they can't muscle votes because they're chaotic within, then he figures out, OK, next step forward, do the right thing. And I think he's going to do that on this supplemental bill.
We will be waiting with bated breath to see what the House Republicans decide they're going to move on Monday night, Senator. I want to go back to the aid package, if you will, the package that the Senate sent over has aid to Ukraine, has aid to Israel, Taiwan, humanitarian aid for the Gaza Strip. There is the World Health Organization, the UN. They have all warned about what is happening in Gaza, just the dire situation that the folks living there, primarily children, are finding themselves in on the brink of famine. What is your concern about how what happened last night and watching and waiting to see what Prime Minister Netanyahu and the war cabinet decide to do today, how the Gaza Strip plays into all of this, the Palestinian people who are there right now living under just terrible circumstances.
Simone, thank you for asking that question, because one of the dangers of the back and forth between Iran and Israel is it takes people's attention off the humanitarian disaster in Gaza. We have been working very hard to push, first privately, then publicly, Israel to allow more humanitarian aid into Gaza. There's no reason the U.S. should have to be airdropping supplies onto Gazans or sending people from Virginia, deploying them to build a pier in the eastern Mediterranean. The right way to get humanitarian aid into Gaza is through the border crossings that Israel is finally allowing to open. It took too long for Israel to open Kerem Shalom. It took too long for Israel to agree to open the Erez border crossing. But you do see, since President Biden's conversation 2 weeks back with Prime Minister Netanyahu, a much greater commitment and an increased pacing of humanitarian aid into Gaza. Now what we need to see from Hamas is a hostage release. We got to have a hostage release and a ceasefire. Hamas, it appears that they don't want to do the hostage release, that every time we get close, Hamas sort of backs away or throws up some new obstacle. And I have my intuition about what may be going on with this. But hopefully the globe and regional leaders like Egypt and Qatar will see the escalation of this weekend as we got to put pressure on hostage release for ceasefire, more humanitarian aid into Gaza. That will then lead to de-escalation in the region and the opening of a discussion about a future for Palestinian autonomy that was promised in 1948, but that's never been realized.
There's Egypt, there's Qatar. What about China? What role do they play here?
Well, China can play an important role. It's going to be interesting to see. I think there's a Security Council meeting today about the Iran-Israel back and forth, and it'll be very interesting to see that the role both China and Russia play in that. Will they be spoilers, as they often are, or will they act, and particularly China, it does seem to have a desire for stability. They don't like chaos. Russia sometimes is more willing to tolerate chaos, I think, than China is. But watch that Security Council meeting today, and I think we'll learn a lot.
To say the least. I think China actually put out some statement over the last couple of hours, Chinese officials echoing just that. And this UN Security Council meeting will be later on today. Senator, what is your biggest concern for the next week? What most worries you as we look ahead to the next couple of days?
Well, my immediate concern is I hope Israel heeds President Biden's advice and doesn't decide to further escalate the situation. I mean, I was so worried when Israel took the strike in Damascus. I believe they took the strike against people that, had maybe had some planning role on October 7. So I get those would be people that Israel would want to go after. But the timing seemed very, very unfortunate to me because we already have a raging brush fire with escalation throughout the region, the Houthis, Hezbollah, militias, and Israel took that strike knowing that Iran would respond. I hope Prime Minister Netanyahu was listen to President Biden and decides that the U.S. and others that helped Israel defend itself, that, we want to thank them. And part of appreciating the work that we're doing to help Israel defend itself is not make the matter worse.
You referenced your own intuition, so I have to know if your intuition is telling you that Netanyahu will, in fact, heed that warning.
My intuition leads me to be slightly optimistic. Slightly.
Slightly optimistic.
Hey everyone, MSNBC has a new and improved app. You'll get real-time alerts and analysis, live blogs, in-depth essays, video highlights, and the best 2024 election coverage. Download the new MSNBC app. Here's how to do it. You tap on the App Store on your phone. You hit search on the bottom right corner. You type in MSNBC. You click on the MSNBC app. You click on Get or the cloud icon and enjoy it.